Thank you for joining us here on a very special tech roundup. I'm joined here today by the technical architecture team. As you may have noticed, AI and especially Microsoft Copilot is moving at a rate of knots, so much so that it's actually moving faster than many of us can write about it. So rather than leave you in the dark or let you try and find the answers to your questions, we're here today just to give you a quick update as to where Microsoft is with Copilot at the moment and where it's moved on since the webinar we did earlier in the year when it launched, to where it's going to be in the next few weeks or coming to the start of April, especially following Microsoft's announcement on the Wednesday, the 13th of March, around security and around device management and how they intend to implement that into the Copilot ecosystem and how they intend for you to work with that. So I suppose where I want to start is from a technology point of view, where do you see where Microsoft are going with the kind of integration of security and of device management into Copilot? I suppose, Lewis, I'll come to you to start with.
So Microsoft's always been very deep in security and compliance. Their 365 infrastructure has been built around purview and your data governance. Some of the core challenges Microsoft faced when integrating Copilot and when they invested in OpenAI was making it work with the existing infrastructure that purview uses to ensure that your data is safe and that your data governance is in place and make sure you don't get data leaks. Copilot obviously opens up a whole new round of questions around that, but those questions have already been answered because it's working with the existing security options you have in place on your 365 tenancy.
Do you see that, like, that's from Microsoft's point of view, that's leveraging Graph to a greater degree? Because obviously when they launched Copilot, the big push was it ties into the data backend, which is Microsoft Graph, but only sort of 50% of the data was being used initially. Do you see this as kind of the start of them pulling in more of the features that sits inside that data set?
Yeah, so Microsoft Graph controls the entirety of your 365 tenancy. Every bit of data that transfers through 365 is done through Microsoft Graph. They are now obviously introducing Copilot for security and Copilot for Intune. Both will use Graph APIs and will be able to do more with the options that are already available to you as an IT administrator or IT manager, but now Copilot will be able to use these functionalities as well.
Yeah, I suppose that's a good place to move on from in terms of Intune has been a core part of what Planet's been kind of talking about for a number of years. And I know that Maciej, you've been working with a number of our MSP clients to move them into the Intune space to give them those benefits. I suppose the fact that Microsoft are now moving Copilot to involve Intune as well, do you see that as being a benefit for those people who are looking to manage their devices inside of, the Microsoft estate with Intune?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, lots of companies now are moving towards, Intune and the way of the modern sort of managing their devices. And I think, yeah, Copilot will play the big sort of factor here because we'll be able to, again, use those API and all that knowledge behind the Intune and basically just convert it into more. I was going to say more sort of like better language for the end user.
Yeah,
that was the word
definitely.
that I was looking for.
Oh, no, definitely, because I think that Intune, I think we all on this call really enjoy Intune and think it's great, but it's also massively complicated, right? That's why we've been running workshops and training on Intune for the last 4 years. No, it's not a product you can just pick up and use. And maybe by introducing natural language over the top of it, it will kind of demystify some of that Microsoftism, as it were, where it's, it's really good, but actually you need a manual to get through it. I think by giving people access to large language models and giving them the ability to ask for, what devices this user got, install this software in human language, it might cut some of those barriers down.
Absolutely. And I remember when we were doing one of the workshops in London last year, I think we were actually asked that question. And I think what we were trying to do at that time, we literally just ask Copilot to pull the data from the Intune about the devices that are not compliant at the moment. And literally, you didn't even have to log into the console of the Intune, but all of the data has been automatically pulled out from it. So it was actually quite cool. I remember that the clients which were at the workshop were like, okay, that's actually working quite nicely. So yeah, that's definitely a feature that is worth mentioning.
And I suppose from a security point of view in general, as you mentioned, this Microsoft have always had a strong security focus when it comes to Intune and to the just 365 in general. But I suppose specifically what they're talking about when they say Microsoft Copilot for security, they're not talking about securing Copilot. They're talking about securing your environment and leveraging tools like Defender and making the most out of the kind of the best of LLMs and the best of the protection suite that they have. How do you see that working for, for an IT manager, someone who's, maybe hasn't got a SOC team, but, needs to better protect their system? Is that where you see it being of benefit to people?
Yeah, so that is one of the core reasons why Microsoft is doing it. Let's be honest, a lot of IT admins, a lot of IT managers won't know everything, and that's okay. But while Copilot for security will know everything. So while you're in your 365 portal, you're in your Defender portal, your Intune portal, when making changes or when you want to make a change, Copilot is there to assist you to make those changes. If you need to do mass changes against devices, Copilot is there. It can give you warnings and give you updates. And the way it integrates into your Defender security score as well. And previously you've been given options, Copilot will be able to help you increase your security score by giving you recommendations based off your 365 tenancy.
It's like having a threat analyst, right? It's like rather than paying someone to be a threat analyst when you need them, you're paying Microsoft for it, right? It's leveraging the data from Graph, from the endpoints, from all these places where it can see the data plus the larger Microsoft data set to give you relevant information, which, let's be honest, Microsoft have the biggest data set of anyone because they operate the operating system you work off of. They operate the platforms that most of us work from. So they have a huge data set to feed back into these models to essentially make them better and help for quicker responses. So it should, when it launches, give people the ability to get to a solution pretty quickly.
And it will make your IT team just as more efficient than what IT teams already are. 365 Intune makes lives so much easier. Just as Intune took over from SCCM, we saw hours of being saved from IT admins instead of manually deploying laptops. It's all done automatically through autopilot. It will be the same with Copilot. When making security changes or making changes to your 365 tenancy, you will have to do less work because Copilot will be able to help you there, or Copilot for security.
I think it's also worth circling back to the kind of, whilst we're talking about security, to the security for the kind of main Microsoft 365 Copilot piece in terms of, there's quite a big chunk of work to do there, right? If you're coming in day one and you've been on 365 for 5, 6, 7 years and you've got a lot of your company data up there and you've grown naturally, then there's a lot of work to do in terms of making sure that your environment's ready for Copilot. It's not just something you want to be running into, right?
Exactly. The permissions in SharePoint have changed over the years from SharePoint on-prem to now online. The best practice will always change, and it's changing again now. Copilot will see everything the user has access to. So if users have access to stuff they might not know about, but they still have permissions to it, Copilot will know that. And it's important that you do a readiness assessment check to ensure that your SharePoint is locked down to whoever needs it, and make sure you have security like sensitivity labels, retention labels in place to make sure that you don't lose data or data doesn't leak out, or certain people don't access data they shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly, and it's quite important because again, as you mentioned, James, everything. I mean, these days, majority of the companies keeps everything in Microsoft in their environment. So obviously, that's how. Sometimes it's during those meetings with clients, we cannot stress enough how important it is actually to check how those permissions within, for example, what Lewis just mentioned, SharePoint environment, how those permissions are set up, because again, majority of the times that we are speaking to clients, they're aware of some sort of structure within. Again, I'm just going to talk about SharePoint here. They're aware about some structure within the SharePoint, but obviously no one is for sure 100% sure until the checks are done. How those permissions, how that structure, how the models, all of those folders within the sites are actually set up, and that's why it's important to do those health check before the company is actually deciding to fully go with the Copilot option.
Yeah, let's be honest. What we've learned from Copilot since it's launched is that Microsoft have built the logic of what Copilot does on the best practice, kind of like what the book says, right, about what you should do as of the end of 2023 for SharePoint. And most people aren't doing that. Things like sensitivity tagging, things like classifying data, although that's been in the SharePoint since, back on premise, people just aren't doing it, right? And those people who are doing it are not really the people that are looking at Copilot at the moment. They're the ones who are kind of scared of Copilot from compliance reasons. And I think that, we're seeing it with a lot of SME, a lot of SMB, where they're like, Copilot's amazing. It's going to cut down the amount of time it takes me to get jobs done. But when you go, yeah, but your data is where this all resides from. And the more you give AI the access to the data, the more that the results are going to be pulled from that data. And if you don't have it classified properly, the more that the data you get back is things that you shouldn't be talking about, right? Or things that, we're a great example of it as Planet, right? Things that are probably no longer relevant. We've written proposals for the last 10 years that technology has moved on so much that if Copilot starts pulling ideas back from proposals 10, 15 years ago, it's going to be irrelevant to a customer now. So it's really about scoping what data and documentation you're allowing Copilot to see. And that comes back to what Lewis was saying about that kind of readiness approach.
Yeah, exactly. And majority of things these days, if we're going to be, I don't know, out of the box experience, usually works with pretty much all of the device, but it's always good to do those small changes, minor adjustments and stuff like that to make sure that you're actually getting almost close to 100% of what you're expecting from the idea.
I think it's also worth mentioning that, we're talking about this as an update because, we talked about Copilot in January, and already we've seen so many changes to the 365 product they've released. We've seen it launch into the mobile apps. We've seen them change buttons around. We've seen them change functionality. We've seen them add in additional security features. But this is not a done product, right? This is an evolution, and we're going to see this kind of evolution and revolution of Copilot and AI through all the things that Microsoft do over the coming years. And it's a case of saying that just because you're sorted today doesn't mean you're sorted tomorrow. And as we've seen with the security piece and Intune piece is getting launched this week. One, they're coming out really quickly. Two, no one's really getting notified about them until they're ready to drop, really. We're getting inklings that Microsoft are working on stuff, and then actually it's out there, and it's, we've got a date for it, April 1st for security, and April 1st is the date for the public preview of Intune. And I should imagine that the other pieces where people are like, oh, Intune should do this, Copilot should do this. We'll see that over the next few months. It's like, oh, well, we should better use Copilot in Delve to do this. Hold on, suddenly it's going to appear. We should better get it through Viva. It's going to be one of those things where Microsoft will slowly keep iterating and updating. And it's like we're moving from this kind of what launched in January being the core to being the peripheral around the outside, right? I suppose something else we're getting asked quite a lot is around how secure is Copilot? How safe is the data that's going in there? What are Microsoft doing with all of my prompts, all of the questions I'm asking of it? Can I expect that to be used for training? Am I expecting to see all my answers turn up on Google in 3 years' time? Lewis, I suppose you've done a lot of research into this. Where's kind of Microsoft standing at the moment in terms of what they're doing with this data when you're using Copilot for 365?
So Microsoft's official documentation and statements show that they don't keep any of the interactions or responses, and they don't use that data to train their large language models. They use their internal data and data that they've got previously to train it. So all of that is safe. Using stuff like Purview, you can even put data retention, so Copilot will wipe logs or chat logs and wipe that data from your tenancy if you so please so too.
Awesome. I suppose another thing I wanted to really quickly touch on is, Maciej, you mentioned about kind of use cases we've already seen for Copilot and 365 in terms of making life easier for people. I think it'd be worth just touching on that. We were talking about this earlier.
Yeah, so one of the examples that I'm always saying, and obviously we've tested it here within our department, was obviously, for example, those Teams meetings that we're having on a daily basis. You can sort of start Copilot, and whilst Copilot is working in the background, obviously it works on the base of the transcript from those meetings, then it gathers the data. And one of the great examples that actually we did, James, I remember when you got back from the holiday, you literally just asked a question to Copilot, what happened during the time when I was away, Monday, Friday, and then it literally just pulled the data from everything, including Teams meetings, including your emails, and it just basically switched into sort of an agenda for you, what sort of things were most important while you were away. And that gives you a huge, I'd say huge peace of mind, because I know that, you know, after, when you're away for like, 5 days, you could have up to like, 500 emails in your mailbox, and you certainly don't want to go through each of them. You just want to say which is the most important emails, and sort of, what information from those emails are the most important, and actually directed to you with the direct questions from those emails. And that, I remember that you were saying to me that actually helps you massively, because you were sort of like, previously it took you like 2 days to sort of get back to on the top of your mailbox, and just Teams messages and stuff, and when you ask Copilot that question, I think it took like half a day to sort of be ready for the new challenges. So yeah,
I think the biggest thing is anywhere that someone's added you or referenced you, it's great at grabbing that data, and it tells you where that email is. So when I've got 1,000 emails, it tells me these 6 emails someone's added you in, and you need to follow up, and it gives you the dates and when you should be doing that. I think that's where Copilot so far is really showing its value, is the ability to cut out those admin tasks that admin is part of what all of us do, unfortunately, as part of our roles, but being able to cut that down is massive. So if you can have an AI tool that costs a little bit of money, do that for you, the amount of time you save is huge. I suppose where I wanted to close this up on is obviously Copilot for security and Copilot for Intune have both been announced this week. Realistically, Copilot for Intune, there's no pricing on at the moment, and Copilot for security, there's some initial pricing. It looks like it's going to be a pay-as-you-go model, similar to a consumption-based model that you'd use in Azure. That's not been confirmed yet, but what I can say is that obviously, if you're looking at these products and thinking, oh, I really would like to get in front of those, then do reach out to the licensing team at Planet. They will be able to tell you the latest information on costs. Same if you want to look at Microsoft 365's Copilot, you can reach out and we can give you the costs for those and tell you where Microsoft is at with them, because that is an evolving landscape, and it's worth being in front of that. Outside of that, I just want to thank Lewis and Maciej for joining me on this roundup. Normally it's just me talking to a camera, so it's quite nice. We will be back with more of these, I'm sure, as this continues to update and change. But until next time, thank you very much.